Hello and welcome to the Yggdrasil podcast. I am your host, Reddit Tosker. Today I'm very happy to have Eravin here. He is a Helldivers YouTuber, probably the only one I watch, actually. Uh, Eravin, thank you for coming.
Hey, happy to be here.
Could you tell my audience a little bit about your channel? Just a synopsis.
Well, I do informational content on Helldivers 2 and cover different controversial news elements that come in from time to time on top of that, but mostly educational videos on how to better play the game and get around its quirks.
So we'll probably just jump into it because it is like the main thing. I'm sure we'll talk about other things along the way, but you're more positive and seem to like the game. You know, you seem to like the game, so I don't want people to come in like, oh, you just brought someone that hates the game and wants to complain. You like the game. I'm curious as to why there's a cloud of negativity around Helldivers 2, not just right now, but persistently. Because I'm not really a part of the discourse. In fact, I don't think I've actually ever made a video talking about saying anything negative about the nerfs in Helldivers 2. But that's a big point of discussion. I made a video a while ago about the Exo Patriot and how its rockets were misaligned. And I love the mechs in that game. I wanted to draw attention to it so that maybe it would get fixed. But when I did that, I got a huge number of comments about, oh, I hate these devs. I hate these devs. They nerf everything. They don't they don't know what the hell they're doing. And then a smaller number of very rabid responses saying, no, the rockets are perfect. Everything's perfect about the rockets. They shouldn't change a single thing. The devs know what they're doing. Everybody complains too much. And I'm like, I didn't say anything about any of this. Who are you? I was making a very simple point. And since then, I have stopped playing. I came back from the Escalation of Freedom update, and I find that not only is that situation still present when I made a video, it's much worse. Where now when I go to YouTube, I look up, everyone seems relatively unhappy with the amount of content in the update, the war bond, the pre-nerf to the war bond, the actual weapons in the war bond, the response from the devs, the reasoning behind it. So I guess I'll just ask you as someone who knows a lot more of it than I do. What is the problem, and is it actually the nerfs?
It is a lot of the negativity is based around the nerfs for sure, and a lot of it stems from the fact that we had an incident where I believe it was the Polar Patriots War Bond released, and in that War Bond, none of the gear felt good. None of it was in theme. You know, you had crampons on the boots that didn't even make it so you stopped slipping on the ice. It felt like the laziest implementation of any paid War Bond that you could imagine. And on top of that, none of the gear was good. So people were upset. And it was around that time that the CEO at the time of Arrowhead stepped down, saying that he was going to be stepping down from his position so that he could focus on directing the game into a more positive direction, more hands on. And after that happened, we actually had probably the most productive best patch the game had ever seen. And it isn't the Escalation of Freedom, unfortunately. It was the one right before this one where it looked like the game was beginning to actually turn around because we got a lot of really good changes and buffs and things were getting better. And it was clear that we were getting a new direction, or everyone was hopeful we were getting a new direction. And now Escalation of Freedom has come out and they've kind of very disingenuously changed the way the fire damage is working, and they kind of obscured that truth by putting it inside of the miscellaneous changes section. It's not like shown as a balance change. Some people took that the wrong way, and
Mm.
it seems almost like it wasn't deliberate that they did this because the the way it was done is clear that they needed to do it because the new fire weapons would have been way too good if they had left it as it was. But the support flamethrower has been caught in the crossfire of that, no pun intended. And it's really put the game out of whack because now everyone's like, oh, we thought things were going to get better. We thought things were changing, and now you give us this. And yeah, it's just kind of an uproar. And now the whole 30% meme has surfaced where everyone's like, every time your favorite gun reaches 30% usage rate, they're going to nerf it into the ground because the incendiary breaker just got destroyed. And it's been a very constant theme as you mentioned, basically anytime a new piece of gear comes out and everyone loves that piece of gear, it's probably gone in a week. they they just kind of soak the fun right out of it, whatever it is. The mech comes out, the mech rockets stop killing things. Emancipator comes out, and its autocannons are doing like a fourth of the durable damage of the other autocannons in the game. The Quasar cannon comes out, it gets a 50% cooldown nerf. It's a constant theme, and I think people are getting progressively more unhappy with it. And as less people are actually playing the game, uh, the people that are left become, more passionate about the game and want to see it move in the right direction because they're more invested now than they were a month ago. And that, I think, is also kind of cycling
Mm.
into more hatred for the changes going forward. But I think there is also a very serious lack of reward structure with the game, especially after you've been playing it for so long. Where
Let me focus back I have a question. So the fire weapons that they introduced in this latest warbot, I didn't get it. I don't have the credits for it. But
right,
but was it necessary to make flame, like, are they good?
they definitely would have been, but they
Okay.
are very bad.
Okay. So they are bad, but they would
They
have
are
been very
bad.
good had they left it as it is.
Yes, which
Okay.
is how I coined the term pre-nerf.
Mm. Okay. Well, the thing is, one of the issues that I have with it is like, okay, fine, you don't want someone to get to 30% of the player base playing on one weapon. You don't want everybody using the same thing. You want side grades, not upgrades. An understandable desire. Maybe even something I would be in favor of normally. But like, I feel a lot of those weapons are not good. I don't know.
Oh,
I just don't. I don't like the assault rifles.
mm,
There's so many of them, and I can't use them very well, especially not against the bugs. Like against the automatons, yeah, they're okay. You can use them to clear off a few of the normal automatons. They're not great against the devastators. They're not great against the chainsaw devastators. But I would use your other weapons if I felt like your other weapons killed things at a sufficient rate. Do you have thoughts on that?
oh, I mean, you're absolutely right. The biggest problem and why there's such a high usage rate for these new tools that come out is these new tools are actually good. They're good at what they do. It's not that they're overpowered or too strong, it's just they actually function and do what we need them to do to win the game. Whereas a lot of the older gear and a lot of the gear in general is just so decrepit to use that you just don't use it. Why would you, right? Like there's no reason to use something that just feels objectively awful in your hands, especially in a shooter. I think one of the most important things in any shooter is going to be the gun needs to feel good to use. Even if it did a lot of damage, if it handles poorly, you probably don't want to use it. And a lot of the weapons do both. They just do no damage and they handle poorly. So why would I ever use that thing?
All right, so to continue with what you were saying, you were talking about the reward structure.
Yeah, I actually saw your most recent video on Helldivers and very much agreed with everything you were saying in that video. And I really never thought about it as much as I probably should have before that moment. But yeah, I mean, there isn't really the carrot. You get it immediately after the content drops, after it's put on the stick as the content drops. So you immediately just reach out and grab the carrot, and now you have the carrot for like another month or two. And then they bring in a new war bond. Okay, I already have the SC for that. I already have over half the medals I need for that. I'm gonna play maybe for 2 days, and I have everything again.
Yeah. Well, see, the issue with it is it's fine if you want the primary reason people are playing your game because your game is fun. But having a decent reward structure doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. The most fun that I had was working my way up to the higher difficulties, unlocking things, experimenting, really experimenting with things. It's like, oh, this is a cool new weapon. Let me unlock it. Let me go through the war bond. But you you do play, you get to level 20, there's nothing else to unlock. Then you get to the bottom of the war bond, and then there's really nothing. Like at that point, there is no more stuff unless you've played enough to accrue super credits to get war bonds month to month. The actual rewards that are there aren't necessarily tied to any kind of difficulty selection. You can unlock this stuff in the war bond by playing easy. In fact, it probably would be faster if you're playing on the easier difficulties because you get through missions faster and you get the medals faster, whatever.
Absolutely.
And so, like, the most fun for me happens on the higher difficulties. You know, you're playing with your friends, you're going through the higher difficulties. But yeah, I just think a decent reward structure would help a lot.
There's definitely a lack of incentives when it comes to playing at the highest difficulty of the game, and that certainly has not gotten any better in the release of difficulty 10, where the only real difference between 9 and 10 is now you might get more experience and requisition slips, but you've been capped on both of those things for months, and you get more liberation to liberate the same planet that you liberated last week, and you'll get 4 rare samples and 2 super samples from dragging the head out of the new super outpost. And you probably capped on those 2. So there isn't really an incentive to go to that higher difficulty, especially because you can get all of those things probably faster, as you said, at the lower difficulties. Not to mention, the super credits are not scaling at that higher difficulty. I mean, I play a ton. I play so much. I did not have the super credits for this Warbond.
Oh, wow.
When it came out.
Oh, that's amazing.
And I've slowed down considerably for sure with Helldivers 2, but I would say I play much more than the average user.
Right.
And because of my choice to only play the game on the highest difficulty, where we really don't open every side objective, not actually side objective, point of interest. The point of interest, yes. We don't always open all the point of interests. In fact, usually we skip the vast majority of them. We very rarely end up actually getting any super credits for the missions we play, even though we're playing at the highest difficulty where you'd expect us to get the most.
Well, it's because the point of interest thing, they're probably the least interesting part of the mission. You know, you don't want to go do them, really. The only reason you would go do a point of interest thing is for the potential of a super credit, you know, for the 10 cents you might find there. And, you know, the really interesting stuff is the mission objectives. So go do here and defend this point while this happens and you know, set up your team or go off on your own and do this stuff over here. But really going through all the point of interest on the highest difficulty, number one, I don't think is fun. Number two, makes the mission harder and makes it more likely that everybody fails and you don't get access to the other rewards, like the super samples, which some people still don't have and actually do care about. You don't feel incentivized to go for the super credits. In fact, it feels like it's designed for you to not feel incentivized to go for the super credits, which leaves people in the position where they don't have enough super credits next Warbot. I haven't gotten the last 3 because I don't have enough, and I just simply don't want to buy it. So this might be a me thing, but I guess you can tell me. I never really got over how the super credit system worked because I don't play generally live service games, and it galls me a little that I have to pay $10 a month for access to new weapons and armor that they are releasing, sometimes very unique weapons and armor, and occasionally, you know, the strongest stuff. Like I've been wanting that grenade pistol for a while, but I don't have the credits to buy it. And so everyone else seems to be okay with it. When the game came out, people were like, Helldivers 2 is, you know, live service done right. Like, this is actually really good. But for someone looking at it from a outsider perspective, someone looking at it from well, I don't usually play live service games. I usually just buy the game, and now I can just get the stuff in the game. This idea that I'm paying $10 a month for what I consider to be very low quality content. Just you know, first of all, it's just a few weapons. $10 is a lot. Like 4 of those, and that's the Elden Ring DLC that I played. that's like 100 or 150 hours of high quality content, maybe higher quality than what the base game gave me. And then people are like, well, you can just farm for them. Let me just put it this way:
Mm,
if you are playing in the most fun way, which is
mm-hmm.
Hell Dive, you aren't going to get a very high rate of super credits. You're simply not. And so if you wanted to farm them, the fastest way to be level 1 and spend a few hours doing it. But that how can you use that as a defense? Don't you think that makes your game look bad when you say, well, you just go and play in a really boring way, turn your brain off and just get the super credits in that way? That
Yeah,
seems yeah.
that's not a game. That's a job.
Yeah.
And at that point, I might as well give them the $10 because I value my time more than the $10 at that point. I would rather do something fun and pay $10 than run around in the sand on like difficulty 3 and find good seats for super credits, which they took that out of the game, which they did need to do that. That exploit was bad economically for the game, and I understand why they fixed it. But just as an example, that still wasn't fun. Even doing that, I'm pretty sure no one was having any kind of fun doing that, even though it was efficient. And it's still the most efficient method of getting super credits. Like, I cannot tell you the last time I dropped into a difficulty 9, 10 now mission, saw a point of interest, saw what was standing there guarding it, and thought, yeah, I want to deal with that for 10 pennies inside of maybe a crate somewhere in there. Or it could just be a rare sample, because here's something else really awful. After you get above, I believe it's difficulty 6, when you go into those points of interest and you open those crates, there can be rare samples in those crates. Below that difficulty, there cannot be rare samples in that crate, which means the pool is actually favored closer to super credits on the lower difficulties than the higher difficulties, where you have this chance to also get this garbage that isn't useful compared to super credits. So the whole system is just completely out of whack. And I would very much agree with the take of, especially the recent war bonds. I would say everything after Democratic Detonation has been pretty subpar as far as the value proposition, in my opinion. Polar Patriots was really the worst out of the bunch, but then we got some things that were at least fun with Viper Commandos, where you had like this really cool jungle theme going on in it. Although the gear was all completely terrible, and the booster was good, to be fair, the the theme was at least good. Like the stuff was cool, it was fun, the armor was good, the booster was good, all the weapons are terrible. And then you move on to this new recent release, and we're pre-nerfing the flaming weapons to make sure that they're not too good on release, but that just made them, pretty much useless. The
What's
cookout
really
shotgun is good. Go ahead.
but what's really funny about the pre-nerf is that you suspect, or at least one would suspect, that they did that to preempt criticism, where they're like they didn't want to release them, have people notice that they're really good, and then nerf them, because then they would have gotten huge backlash. And so they pre-nerfed them, I assume, to preempt that and stop that from being a problem. But it became a huge problem. Like I came back to play in this, the biggest update they've ever done, and it seemed like it could have been a situation where like, oh yeah, everybody's coming back. We've got 50,000 players again. It's a happy situation to be in. But because they did that, they really shot themselves in the foot, and it's the opposite. And the only thing anybody's talking about is like, oh, these these developers don't know anything.
Absolutely. It is pretty much how it went. Um, and we got one good weapon out of this war bond, but again, that value proposition. Have you seen what the booster does in this war bond? Because it's actually just kind of a grief machine.
Yes, it explodes on impact. I thought that'd be really cool. That'd be really good.
It's cool in a way, but all of your supply packs that you call in, your weapons that you call in, the hell pod that comes in, it's all setting the area on fire around it.
I see.
Um, and if you call in, like, say, the bubble shield to protect you or your allies or something, the area underneath it inside the shield is on fire. So it's just kind of a troll booster. It's fun, but again, that value proposition, right? $10 for that is
Right.
it's a bit steep for most, and I could definitely see that being the case. And
Is it
I
at least good?
certainly no,
No, no.
no.
I really thought it
No.
might be interesting to like drop a supply pod on something and then like hit a bile titan with it, and then it's also super strong fire, so that it kills it with just that.
I wish fire damaged Bile Titans. Yeah, unfortunately not. It'll kill like small stuff. So that's kind
Oh,
of fun.
hmm. Okay, so you mentioned something interesting that I think is also a problem. You said you go and you play, and you go and you take a planet, and you take the same planet that you took last week because it came back. What's going on with the Galactic War? Why is it dragging on so long? And do they plan to keep it like never ending throughout the whole playtime of the game?
I believe if I were to speculate on what's going on with the Galactic War, they're kind of stalling as much as possible at the moment because they feel like they're under a lot of pressure in the balancing department and bugs department of the game, which is in turn kind of pushing back the story beats that would be being added into the game through the Galactic War because we've been getting we I would say we haven't had anything particularly interesting happen since Meridia was turned into a black hole. That was
Hmm.
probably the last really cool story beat that happened. We've had a couple new missions added into the game, but they do kind of just boil down to go into an area, blow up cool thing that they've added to the game, and then leave, which is kind of the same thing you've been doing for 6 months now. So is it really new? That's up for debate. But you take a planet, and typically the major orders kind of have this tendency to go back and forth between the fronts. And while you're over in the Terminids, the bots are attacking the same planet that you just liberated. The defense campaigns fail because no one wants to play defense missions. And then the major order switches back to bots. You go take that planet back. The Terminids push in and take a planet back. And it's just kind of a never ending tug of war. And it really doesn't help when a major order comes out and it actually just says kill X number of things. I think that is probably the time when the most players are logging off is when they see that major order because kill X quests in my live service game is not really what I want to log in and see.
Hmm. So I suppose. So here's the thing. I usually I'm a very story oriented person. I like stories in most of my video games. People are like, oh, I don't care about the story as long as the gameplay's good. I'm like the opposite. I don't care about the gameplay as long as the story is good. And some people will be like, well, then why do you play Helldivers? Why do you play
Mm.
Earth Defense Force or stuff like that, where the story is either bad or not a high priority? Well, it's like, yeah, there's not a narrative necessarily, but there's a it's important that they're hell divers. It's not it's important. You can't just replace them with random soldiers. It's important that they have this patriotic ideal, and they're super fanatical, and they scream patriotic things as they go out. The whole culture around it and the vibe around it. That's kind of like
Hmm.
a story. It's similar to a story. So in Deep Rock Galactic, doesn't really have a story, but it's important that they're dwarves. It's important that they're it's important that they like gold, and they like minerals, and they complain about their cart. You know, it's important that the management doesn't care that much about them. It's cool. I like that aspect of it. Now, what I'm trying to get at is like Deep Rock Galactic is has seasons, and during the seasons that they have, a meteor will come by the planet. It's falling apart, and little meteorites are hitting the planet, and they have an infection in them, and they affect the local wildlife, and that changes things throughout the season. So the story changes, the area around it changes. You can see the meteor, you can see the things happening. When you get into the missions, new objectives spawn, new bosses are there, new enemies are there because of the infection. A whole lot happens with this season, and it changes the dynamic and the look of the HUD, not the HUD, the hub, the look of the hub. A lot goes on when something like this happens. And I really wish that Helldivers did something like that, or made additions to their missions as different as something like Deep Rock Galactic, because as it stands, the game is super fun. I would even say that the moment-to-moment gunplay in Helldivers 2, I love Helldivers. I love the moment-to-moment gunplay in Helldivers 2. It's just that one of the big things is that it kind of blends together. Unless you're fighting the robots or the bots, that's the only time you'll be switching loadouts, really. Unless there's
Yeah.
like a specific objective, that, and then you might be switching loadouts for that. But a lot of the missions boil down to go to this part in the map, defend this part while you're doing something, go to the next part in this map, defend that part while you're doing something, and so on and so forth. And so your loadout doesn't change very much. The kinds of things you see in the mission doesn't change very much. There's not much of a difference. It blends together and it's rather samey. And the story-based mission objectives don't often change that situation, and they're not happening at a decent rate.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that, and it's pretty much the situation. There are maybe two specific types of objectives where you will. There's three. There's three times that you'll change your loadout from your standard loadout, and I would say that's if you're on a blitz mission where you only have 12 minutes and all you have to do is destroy nests or destroy fabricators. Run a loadout that's geared towards building destruction specifically, and then you leave in 12 minutes. You've got eradicates where you'll change your loadout into a setup that's very combative because you're going to have to take on a very large swarm of enemies face to face, mano a mano, in a very enclosed space for a set amount of time before you leave. And then you have the 20-minute rocket defense missions where you are in an entrenched position and have to play
Mm-hmm.
a pseudo tower defense objective.
Those are
That
fun.
definitely changes up the loadout. And then you have your standard loadout for every other objective in the game.
Right.
Like every other objective besides those is basically gonna play out the exact same way for you. And I think a lot of the fun still comes in from, as you said, that moment to moment gameplay and the stories that you create with your friends,
Right.
kind of role playing as these super patriotic, fanatical soldiers. And the fun that comes out of that is it's story worthy in its own right. Like it's the kind of stories that the players tell in those moment to moment situations that really make the game shine.
Mm.
And we have had some elements like you were mentioning with the meteor and Deep Rock Galactic. We've had some glimmers of that, like with Meridia turning into a black hole, and like now you
Yes,
can go there and you can stare into the void, and
that was
everyone
cool.
thought that was awesome when they did that. And the actual fighting on Meridia when we were taking it to do that to it, Meridia looked horrible. Like the super colony on Meridia was visually just
Hmm.
so bugged up. It was so gross. And that was cool. Like I'd love to see more things like that happen more often, but for the most part, it's just kind of stagnated, and we're just getting a lot of kill this, kill that, take that, and the story really hasn't moved particularly forward in a while. I'm really hopeful that the Illuminates are on the horizon here to really shake things up.
That would definitely get me interested. I've been eager to see. I didn't play the original Helldivers. I don't know if you have, but
Mm.
I'd be very eager to see what they're all about.
Yeah, they were very cool in the original. They were actually my favorite faction to fight in the original game, so I'm super excited to see them return.
I kind of wish they had postponed this update because really, like, they really hyped up this. The biggest update that ever had. But one of the criticisms that I see amongst all the other criticisms that I see is that it's not much of an update. How do you feel about the update?
Escalation of Freedom getting the joking titles of Escalation of Blood Pressure, Escalation of Boredom, Escalation of Nothing. The memes you see where they take the trailer where they say, "Did we show you everything?" and they change it from him saying no to saying yes. Those are all pretty warranted, in my opinion. And it's not because I think this is all Escalation of Freedom has to show us long term. It's kind of like the announcement. Really, the PR is just being handled very poorly. I do feel like this particular part of the update was very overhyped,
Mm.
and that's part of the reason why it's catching so much criticism. But it seems like they're gearing up for kind of a seasonal kind of situation where this is the escalation of freedom update of the game. We're going to be doing a lot of major updates and changes to the game and additional content drops throughout this portion of the time that we're working on the game, or like this portion of the timeline, right? And then after that's done, we'll go into a uh, new update or new season kind of deal. Is how it feels like they're going for it. As at the very least, that's kind of how they did it in Helldivers One. They updated the title card of the game like this with some kind of fanatical moniker like Escalation of Freedom, and then they proceeded to push new content out throughout the next few months based around that update.
I
Not
see.
so much all in that one update initially, but throughout the time going forward. It's almost like they might have overhyped this because they were maybe afraid that they were becoming a little bit irrelevant
I
with
see.
with the player base dumping so fast.
Is it actually that fast? I've heard some people say that it's normal and that it's not really that fast. It's normal for live service games to lose player counts and then balance out around the level that they were. Do you, what do you think about that?
Uh, at the end of the day, a live service game like Helldivers 2 is always going to bleed players down to a much more reasonable level from the great high that it started at. That's just how it's going to be, right? But I think what really expedited it was the Sony debacle that happened. I think it was about 3 months into the game. That had everyone in an uproar. People were worried about losing access to the game, and it took a monumental effort from the community to overturn that decision,
Hmm.
um, which was great.
Yeah,
But
I was very happy. I did not want to link to my son. It's just offensive. It's offensive that the
mhm.
all these companies think that it's just okay. You know, you're used to it by now. You're a boiled frog. I can just make you take all of these different things, and you have to log into 15 different things to play any of the various games that you want to play with things that you don't use. Earth Defense Force 6, I don't know if you know anything about it, but it's got some similar vibes to Helldivers 2, and it's a bug game where you kill alien bugs and four-player co-op. I like it a lot, but it recently came out in Steam, and it did the same thing, but with an Epic account. It's like you have
Mm.
to have an Epic account to play it, and I'm like, I'm not getting an Epic account to play it. I already played the Japanese version. I don't need to do this.
Yeah, yeah, it's become much more common these days for you to have to link to third party accounts. And personally, I feel like my data is probably everywhere already, and I'll sign it away to Sony. I'll sign it away to Epic as I'm needed. I just want to play the game,
Right.
whatever. But what really did it for me, and the reason that I even like addressed it publicly with like content and videos and such, was the Sony debacle was a big problem for me because I was seeing an issue where a very large portion of the world did not have the ability to make a account with Sony, did not have the ability to do PSN, and they were going to lose access to the product that they had paid for. They were no longer going to be able to play Helldivers 2. And that for me was like, yeah, this can't happen. That's not okay.
Yeah, that was not
Uh
acceptable.
yeah, that
Incredible
could
that that went
never
down.
happen.
Why did they sell it in those regions in the first place if those regions didn't have the ability to make a Sony account?
The excuse that was given was that they. So I actually, like day one of playing Helldivers 2, linked my account with my PSN because you had to on launch. You had to do it immediately. But they apparently ran into issues with server stability or something along those lines that they had to disable it shortly after and make it so you didn't have to do that. But they just continued selling copies to people in the regions that were going to eventually lose access when they
I see.
eventually had to re-implement that. And I can't say whose fault specifically that would be, but it's definitely something that should have never been on the table. And I think that whole situation is definitely what sent Helldivers 2's popularity into a hell dive.
I see. All right. So, assuming that Escalation of Freedom actually does have more stuff along the lines, and maybe not even limited to just this update, What do you think it's going to take? Like, what would you like to see to be completely satisfied with your product?
Uh, there are okay, so I've got actually four major things that I would really like to see come out of Escalation of Freedom by, I'll say, the end of quarter 1 next year. And the first thing on my mind would be extracting the new objective, the new side objective heads and eggs from these difficulty 10 missions. They've not talked about this is something that's floated around the internet for a while, that there's going to be new intel missions where you extract this optional intel package from the game and you get access to these new secret bonus missions or something. And I would really like to have seen that implemented in instead of getting a couple samples. uh, Another idea that my community had last night, because we were spitballing, like, what does endgame for Helldivers 2 look like? What does endgame progression look like? What would we like to see from the achievement of playing the hardest difficulty in the game? And what I immediately snapped to was, give us weapon modifications for completing difficulty 10. Reward us somehow in a way that we can purchase extended magazines
Oh
and
yes.
different scopes and sights for our weapons
Oh
from playing the
yeah.
hardest difficulty. And I think just that would do so much for people playing at the hardest difficulty and make people want to improve so that they can play on that hardest difficulty.
Yeah.
Just the incentive of actually being able to have a rifle that doesn't have a 30 round magazine in this military game would be fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. Even if it was even if it was somewhat limited, like I'm okay with them restricting it somewhat. I just want to have access to it. I want the ability to have access to it. Like Deep Rock Galactic has
Hmm.
weekly things. You can get overclocks on a weekly base. Well, yeah, kind of on a weekly basis. There are other ways to get them, but for the most part, it's a weekly thing. So complete an operation on difficulty 10 once a week, and you get something cool. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
or maybe points to get something cool from a shop, something along those lines, or even just cosmetics. God, I would love cosmetics, because sometimes there are effects that I like on the armor, but I like the appearance of other armors. I don't want to necessarily have something like that. Or cosmetics for the weapons, even. Maybe they'll have different variations of the same weapon.
Hmm.
So what was the other two things that you wanted?
I think going off of that as well, while we're on the topic, having the ability to customize weapons from playing at the hardest difficulty, having the ability to purchase paint for your armor from playing at high difficulties, the ability to purchase skins for your guns on high difficulties. I think people would absolutely love something like that and give them so much more incentive to play than we have currently, where I'm capped at level 150, 50,000 rec slips, and etc. amount of samples for months on end.
Mm-hmm.
It would give me something to look forward to besides just dropping all of my resources on the next thing that comes out immediately, only to refill them 2 games later.
Yeah.
But the next few things that I would really like to see come to the game and soon is, I would love to see a major overhaul in design philosophy for what we're doing with our weapons and our balancing of the weapons, because we have shown that we can get good changes for weapons. And you brought up the idea of power creep, and honestly, for me, I think at this point, just let her rip. Just let's see some power creep in Helldivers 2, because we've reached the point in the timeline where we are tying rockets to the sides of Striders' heads. Uh, and it's not like that's in difficulty 10. That's in 9 now too. So the game has just gotten harder compared to what it was, not even just in that last difficulty, but in general. The enemies are getting power creep
How are you
compared
dealing
to
with
what we're getting.
how are you dealing with chargers now? That the flamethrower has been nerfed. Like the flamethrower could use to deal with a lot. How are you dealing
Mm.
with them nowadays?
That's actually a pretty hot topic at the moment. My immediate snap decision when I saw that my flamethrower would not be doing the job anymore was to pick up the commando,
Hmm.
due to that being a two-shot kill to all charger heads, where we now have like this variant behemoth, right? And the behemoth it doesn't go down if you shoot it with any other kind of anti-tank rocket one time in the head. They're all 2 shots to the head, but the commando can rapid fire too, bang bang, and the thing goes down, right? So it's kind of a immediate solution to the problem, and that's what the flamethrower was to me, was an immediate solution for the charger. It's going to go down within the next 2 to 4 seconds. And it begs the question, why have we reached a point where I need to be able to kill a charger in 2 to 4 seconds? Well, the answer to that is because there's 6 more of them on my screen too. And it's not so much that flamethrower taking them down so quickly was overperforming. It was just allowing me to exist.
So I personally really love the mechs on this game. I think they're like some of the nicest designed mechs. I love their boxy frame. I like their stupid slow walk and their lumbering, like going over the battlefield. As soon as the Patriot came out, that's the game for me. Like I was gonna make this work on the highest difficulties, or at least close to the highest difficulties, no matter what. And so that's really the reason that I made that. I love the design. Like I don't really like fancy Gundam-esque mechs. It's these blocky, easily destroyed, lumbering, weapons platforms that are my thing. And so the problem is, first of all, they were fantastic at launch. There were people that were complaining about them. No, they were all wrong.
Yep.
They were all wrong.
Great.
They were great at launch. They were so good. If I had infinite ammo on those things, I could take out infinite bugs. Doesn't matter. Doesn't.
Right.
But so now they have the behemoth chargers, and now I finally have managed to get a little better at aiming the damn rockets, even though they're still wrong. And the behemoth chargers take 3 hits to the head, I think, with the rockets, maybe a little bit more. The problem is,
you have 12.
Yeah, you have I think 14 or something. No, wait.
Yeah, and you.
Yeah. Either way,
either way, it's not enough.
Yeah, and I can't hit the behemoth chargers in the head. I don't know what's going on, but I have finally tuned myself for hitting the regular charger heads, and now that the behemoth chargers are everywhere, when I come back, like I can't see their head. But the rockets don't go where I want them, first of all, and I can't accurately aim. Is this part of the head? Is this part of the head? I can never seem to kill them with 3 rockets. It is very frustrating for me.
I think that is in a just guessing, because I haven't actually ever shot the Patriot at a behemoth, but I would bet you anything that the reason that you're having a difficult time with that is they kind of took the wind out of the sails of the Patriot suit by making its rockets deal reduced damage against slanted surfaces. And because the charger, especially the behemoth charger's head, is so
slanted,
ridiculously slanted, that like 9 times out of 10 you fire a rocket at it, you're probably getting the slanted amount of damage, and then you're going to question if you're even hitting the thing half the time, right? And it's probably that's an example of just in-game information being obscured for virtually no reason. I think that's probably something else that I would really like to see added into the game, is some form of bestiary, some way that the player can inform themselves of what they're getting into with these enemies and how to combat them properly, what's armored, what isn't, without looking to YouTube or Reddit or Google or whatever. The in-game resources are just really lacking. If you go through the weapons list, you'll see text like light armor penetrating, medium armor penetrating, explosive, and it doesn't tell you what any of that means. You go through your stratagem list in the ship, and it doesn't even tell you that. It doesn't tell you the amount of damage any of these weapons do, any of these stratagems do, how much armor they penetrate. Nothing. It all comes down to like looking at a wiki or looking online, and I don't think it needs to be that way. I think it's a little bit ridiculous at this point, honestly.
I would even appreciate a bestiary where you use up some of these resources. You have you're capped up on samples, you're capped up on requisition slips, and maybe even medals. Something where you can use up some of those requisition slips to unlock the knowledge, of the charger. So now you have a diagram of the charger, how much it takes to kill it, and then if you had other resources telling you how much damage things do to parts, you wouldn't have to spend so much time on the internet to understand these things, because I really don't like to do that. I like to just play the game. I don't want to have it be so obscure I have to go to an outside resource to explain to me how and why something's not working.
Yep. And that's just kind of what it's boiled down to. And the mech situation too is just a little bit sad because I definitely had a lot of friends that when the mechs came out, they were like, "This is the best thing I've ever seen. All I want to do is play in the mech. Just bring mechs and drop them for me. I'll pilot them the entire game. This
That's
is the most fun I've ever
that's
had."
exact. I was like, okay, I'll bring your support weapon. You bring an additional mech. I'll
Hmm.
drop you your support weapon, and you give me the mechs from now on.
Exactly.
It was
And
beautiful.
when those first came out, I think it was the first time in a very long time where me and a group of teammates were staying together fighting difficulty 9 Terminids because we had this lumbering mech covering us while we fought through the forces and could actually complete the objectives without splitting up for once.
Mm.
So that was, I think, the first time where we were actually doing that and it was working for us, where we weren't going to run out the clock just fighting bugs constantly. Of course, back before like all the anti-tank weapons got their buffs, but the Patriot really came in and saved the day. Even if you did blow yourself up every time you turned left, you just kind of got used to not turning left, I think.
Yeah,
After a certain
yeah.
point.
At that point, I would rather go back to the mech blowing up, because at least I know not to do that, and
Me
it puts in
too.
the work.
Yeah, I'd rather it kill stuff and me blow myself up because of shoddy design. I mean, that's lore accurate, isn't it? They sent us some shoddy mechs that just like blow up whenever you turn left too quickly. I thought it was kind of comedic, especially the first time it happened to me.
Right, right. I'd rather just see it on the map, because after those nerfs, like, I just never saw it. I never saw
No.
anybody using it. And it's not just about me using it. It was nice to see. It was nice to see one around, and then I could stick close to one, and I can even notice when people were using it effectively, because they wouldn't just shoot everything. If I'm around and they think that I can handle what's around, they won't even shoot. They'll stand there looking around. I'm like, see, that's what I like to see. You're saving that ammo. We're gonna need that later, and you know that I can deal with what's here.
Yeah, it was strategic. It was dynamic gameplay. It was different. It added something to the game. It does add some. Well, it tries to add something to the game, but they're just they're not performing. And the Emancipator, if you're around for that release,
Hmm.
it comes out and this new autocannon mech, everyone's like, "Oh, this can't be bad. There's no way this is bad."
Yeah.
The autocannon is one of the best things in the game. The autocannon turrets shred things.
Hmm.
Surely something with two of them mounted to its arms is going to be great, right? And then it's got like 60 durable damage and it's taking 25 shots to kill a charger.
Yeah.
And people just got over it by the time it stopped being a free stratagem, and I don't think I've really seen anyone bring it into a mission since, which is just a shame because it's cool.
And you can bring it to the automaton missions, and it does work in the automaton missions. But, like, one of the reasons the autocannon is good is that you can go into first person mode and accurately aim, and you can hit hulks in the head, and you can really be effective at a distance. And first of all, the gun is also misaligned, because you're looking from one side, not both sides. So they're not both accurate. And you can't really zoom in with it. It would be really nice if you could go into first person mode with it, and because why wouldn't you? Like, why wouldn't you be able to like look just not a huge zoom, just let me see a little bit better, like I can with the
Yeah.
autocannon.
And the other thing, you've probably noticed this because you play with the mechs a lot. One of the thing that really threw me off about the Emancipator is autocannons like this. You need to be able to hit your target. You need precision, as you said,
Hmm.
but it's impossible to have any kind of precision because your aiming reticle that's going to determine where the shot goes is like scattering around as if I've got two broken arms worth of injuries. It's constantly moving in the mech, even if I'm completely still. And I don't know why that is. I feel like maybe that's a bug and they just never fixed it, but it pretty much ruined using that mech for me because I couldn't accurately aim at Hulk skulls with it
Yeah.
very easily. And even if I could, I'm getting one shot by the cannon turret that I didn't see across the map. Uh,
There's
oh,
also,
and
yeah. Go ahead.
This is a recent change, but now thinking about it, if I did bring an Emancipator into the map, one of its biggest counters is the Factory Strider cannon, which killed it instantly with one shot. But speaking of power creep, that thing now has burst fire. It was just kind of an unannounced, cool little change they threw in here on the last
I didn't even
patch.
know that. I did not even know that.
Yep.
It's so one of the things I really, really don't like about the mechs, and this isn't like a big deal, but it bothers me specifically a lot, is that you can't shoot down very good. Even the turret, the autocannon mech, the Emancipator, it can't shoot down, and I'm like, why? Why would you do
Mm-hmm.
that? Because if you look at the Patriot, the Gatling gun can shoot down, and it's about the same length. It doesn't seem to be a reason why you wouldn't do that. And so I pointed this out in a video, and they were just like, "Oh, that's because they don't want you to blow yourself up." That's not your
Yep.
business. That's not your business. You let me decide if I'm going to blow
You let
myself.
me
I
decide.
will decide if that shot's going to blow myself up. It's not your business to be
Yeah.
restricting me in that way for no reason.
It was I think the reason they did that, and this is the other reason every time I try to aim down in a mech, I can't stop imagining in my head as a mech covered in band-aids, is because they did that to it preemptively, because they didn't want another situation like the Patriot where turning left would blow itself up. They like overcompensated and like made sure that at absolutely no angle you move this thing is it going to cause itself to detonate. And that is a problem at the core of the design of the mechs.
Mhm.
And they didn't really go back and fix it properly. But the reason that is even possible for you to detonate yourself in that way is the arms of the mechs are not considered a vehicle, first of all, which is really weird.
Ah.
And they're considered completely separate entities to the mech itself, which is why they're able to hit themselves with the things that come out of the arms, as the arms are not the mech. And I think that's probably uh I don't want to use the word lazy, but it feels a little bit lazy that they did that so that they can have other mechs in the future be implemented easier by just switching out the arms.
I see. I see. So the thing that frustrates me the most about the whole mech conversation is that anytime I point out the mechs, people are like, "Well, just switch the side that you're aiming with the rockets and go to the other side, and then the rocket will aim accurately." And it will actually. It will aim accurately. It will
Mm-hmm.
hit where you're going. Have you tried doing that? Have you experimented with that?
Yeah, actually, I included that in some content recently, talking about how that's a really roundabout way to make it so you can aim with the other arm accurately. Although the first issue you run into whenever you just try to do that is it means your right gun is firing while you're doing it,
Mm-hmm.
and you can rebind for that too. But then you do all that rebinding, and you're like, should I really have to do this just
Yes.
to use this mech properly?
And then if you do rebind it, after you do all of that rebinding, because it's a process. It took me a while
It
to figure out
is.
what to rebind where. Um, then you have to be like, well, what about when I'm not in the mech? That now I've rebinded all my stuff in this
Yep.
weird way, and I don't necessarily want to move and shoot in like this when I'm not in the mech.
Nope.
Very very annoying when people are like, oh, it's fine. Just rebind it. That's a solution. No, it's not. No,
It's almost like after that process, you're then also expected to set up a macro on your keyboard that can switch the control layout back to your on foot loadout whenever you exit the mech.
yeah. And I'm just like, no, just fix it. Like just
Yeah,
just
or we could just fix it.
just fix it.
Like the X key on the keyboard switches the flashlight on and off. How about we make that switch shoulders on the mech instead?
Hmm.
There you go.
And have it set up so that it doesn't require you to be aiming to be able to switch sides. Because you need to be considered aiming inside the mech to be able to switch sides. So just like switch, just as soon as you enter the mech, it's considered aiming all the time. Just do
Yep.
that.
Yeah, and there's not really a reason they couldn't do that either. It's just kind of odd that it's not like that.
All right, did we go through all of the we got a little sidetracked with my mech ramblings, but did we get all of the four things that you wanted in the future?
The last one was just the Illuminates. I
Right.
think we need the third faction to bring interest back to the game, bring experimentation back to the game, and most importantly, bringing a third faction into the game. The Illuminates function defensively so much differently than the other two that it's going to allow so many would-be bad weapons and stratagems to
Mm,
shine much more brightly now that they actually have a side of the conflict where they're good on.
yeah. Yeah. One of my favorite things about Helldivers is that fighting the bugs and the bots actually feels very different. Like it is a completely different. You do select different loadouts. Well, most of the time, you do select different loadouts to fight them, and it just feels like a completely different game. This is why so many people like were fighting the bugs for such a long time, and then they go and they fight the bots for the first time, and they're like, "Oh, what the fuck is this? What is this Vietnam shit I'm dealing with? They're shooting back now. They're not supposed to be able to do that."
Yeah. You
Uh,
really do just get completely different experiences, and it's as if you have two different games to play, where one you're playing like a horde shooter and you're running through waves and waves of enemies, and then the other one it's like, oh no. I need to slow down a little bit here and
yeah,
really think about who I engage and when, because these
good
guys
use of
shoot back and
cover.
it hurts quite a lot. Yeah, it's
There's a
now a
reason to go in
third
first
person
person
cover
mode.
shooter.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a lot like that with the Illuminates too. It'll just be a third game attached to the game when
I'm really
those
hope.
guys come
Yeah,
out.
I'm really hoping that that's the case. I was almost a little worried that it wouldn't be that way, but I'm glad to see that you think that it is going to be different enough that will it'll feel like that again.
Yeah, 100% confident that taking on the Illuminates is going to feel like a whole new experience in Helldivers too.
All right, that's all the questions I had. Do you have anything you wanted to volunteer or talk about before we head out?
Hmm, thinking. I think we covered most of the important issues. I would say that as a closing statement, that Helldivers 2, even with all of its issues, I think it's important that we discuss the issues and we create a dialogue with the developers so that we can see the game improve. And that's why I like doing these kind of discussions and talking about the game in this form. Um, but the game as a whole is still great. Like, it's fun. It's a
Right.
really fun time. You can jump into Helldivers 2 and you can play it for a couple hours even if you haven't played it for a while, and you're going to have a good time. It's probably not as many people's main game anymore, but even with all of the problems it's facing and the shoddy releases of war bonds and content and such, it's still at the core a good time. And I think that's why so many people are still passionate about seeing it getting moved into a better direction in the future. So, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
I'm
think
I'm hopeful that things will still get better.
I agree. I don't really talk about things that I don't care about. Like if I'm complaining, it's usually because I'm complaining about something that I like. You know, I'm complaining. I really like Helldivers. I really like playing it, and so if I'm bothering to bitch about it, it's because it matters to me that it improve in the future.
Exactly. These conversations and dialogues, they come from a place of passion, of a place where we care about the game and we want to see it in its best form because we enjoy it so much. Not because we hate it.
Right,
Completely opposite.
right. I just wouldn't talk about it if that was the case.
Exactly. And a lot of people don't. That- that's why there's so many less people playing the game.
Exactly, exactly. I do think that people will come back though, because um, considering how much negative comments I get, like and views that even though I don't cover Helldivers, I'll still get
Hmm.
significant views anytime I do upload a Helldiver video, and people will come and they'll complain, but I'm like, you're waiting for it to change. I can tell, like you're being nasty and you're being mean, but the only reason you would come by a video like this to complain is because you're either you are playing it or you're just hanging around in the atmosphere, just waiting for it to get good. I'm willing to bet if significant changes happen, the game will bounce back.
Yeah, I would agree. I think a lot of the nasty atmosphere around the game and the the controversial comments and such, they all come from, again, a place of passion. They're people that are waiting in the winds, hoping things get better, and then they, see something come out about an update that's negative, and they're ready to jump on it again because they're like, I can't believe that this wasn't
The one.
what brings me back. Yeah.
All right. So I guess that'll be it. Thanks a lot for coming, Eravin. Keep
Yeah,
up
this
the
was
good
fun.
work on your videos. I'll keep watching. And everybody at home, remember, we like the game. We like the game. When you when you're typing in your comments, keep that in mind.
We love the game.
All right. This has been the Yggdrasil podcast. Thank you all very much for listening.